I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment to order, and Mr. Charlevoix has graciously offered to read the preamble tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consent under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient meeting, we've adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state your full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes also will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairman of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, please select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We do want to hear your views, however, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to any comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into the committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided at the back of the room for this purpose. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant, the owner and/or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such a notice on the green sheets. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last date to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and the other people in attendance tonight. And just to note that tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. And finally, we ask that any cell phones or pagers be switched off during this meeting as they tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charlevoix. We'll note that Ms. McHale sends her regrets for tonight's meeting. Members, are there any conflicts of interest to declare this evening? Seeing none, I'll now ask if there's any requests for deferrals or withdrawals at tonight's meeting. Sir. Your name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joris Kieran Design, 100 Bronte Road, Unit 10, Oakville. Requesting a deferral for item CAVA 047 2018 at 392 Tennyson Drive to address staff comments.
Okay, thank you. Members? Any questions on the deferral? The first available date is April 24th, but we'll let you meet with staff and contact Secretary-Treasurer when you think you're ready to come back.
Okay.
Members, in support of the deferral? Okay, seeing none opposed, your item is deferred.
Thank you.
Any other requests for deferral? If I could turn to staff, Ms. Mahalovich, I believe staff were seeking a deferral on 288 William.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee. Staff have had some conversations with the applicant for the application 045-2018 at 288 William Street regarding their application and their need for heritage review. With that, staff have met with the applicant earlier last week, prior to this meeting to discuss those issues, and those are ongoing. Respectfully, staff requested deferral at no cost to the applicant to allow for those conversations to continue.
Thank you. Is the applicant here tonight?
Mr. Chair, my name is Christoph Olak. I'm from OM Architecture, representing the client, owner of 288 William Street.
Okay, and you're in support of staff's request for the deferral?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, support the deferral being requested? Okay, your application is deferred. Okay, we'll now call the first application for tonight, application B1801 1614 at 254 Carolyn Drive.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, sorry, it's been a long day. Last name Baker, first initial D, Weirfolds LLP, 1525 Cornwall Road, Suite 10 in Oakville.
Ms. Baker, you would appear to have significant and well-informed opposition
Thank
here
you.
tonight.
Thank you, and so I would like to, I trust that members of the committee have the planning staff report before them. And so, of course, we share the opinions contained within the planning staff report that is before you. And we'd like to highlight a couple of items for you with respect to that. So first and foremost, Mr. Chair, committee members, the subject property is zoned RL3-0 in 2014-014. And in all of your experience, you'll know that 2014-014 was the zoning bylaw that was put in place to implement Livable Oakville and to implement the policies within Livable Oakville. And it was a detailed exercise through the neighborhoods to determine what the appropriate zones were that reflected each of the neighborhoods for which it governed. And so for the subject neighborhood, where the subject property is, the RL3-0 zone was selected for that neighborhood to implement the policies of the official plan to do with lot size, lot area, lot frontage, and neighborhood character. And the result of that was that the zoning bylaw implemented a minimum lot area of 557.5 square meters and a minimum lot frontage of 18 meters. The 2014-014 zoning bylaw, especially as it relates to the RL3, although among other zones, does not regulate lot depth. And it doesn't regulate lot depth, as we all know, because once you know the lot area and the lot frontage, the lot depth calculation is also to be determined. But it's not as important, clearly, because they don't regulate it, as lot frontage and lot area. So here we have a situation where we come before you with an application for consent on two new lots. The severed lot having a lot area of 558.7 meters squared and a 21.79 meter frontage, and a retained lot of 633.2 meters squared with a frontage of 21.59. So the retained lot is significantly larger than the zoning bylaw requirements in terms of area, and quite a bit larger in terms of frontage. The severed lot is approximately the zoning size. It's slightly larger in area than what is required under the zoning bylaw, again with a 21.79 meter frontage. So all of that is clear in the report. And all of it is clear that the lots that are being created as a result of this conform to the zoning bylaw. This is what I submit to you as a demonstration of gentle intensification. The very type of intensification that's contemplated by this residential intensification policies within the Livable Oakville Plan, and certainly within the growth plan and the PPS. And I won't go, given I'm watching the time tick, tick, tick away, but I won't go into the details of those, but I would note that planning staff at both the town and the region note that what the subject application that's before you is consistent with the PPS and conforms with the growth plan. I also note, for your reference, the applicable policies in the Livable Oakville official plan, in particular policy 4.3 at page 5 of the report, which I'll leave to you to read given my time frame, and 11.1.9. And I call those to your attention because those are the very policies by which the RL 3-0 zone is intended to implement. And what comes from that is the conclusion, not only my submission to you, but shared by planning staff, that the proposed lots not only comply with the RL 3-0 regs, but are also compatible with the surrounding lot fabric, which makes sense. That's the zoning reg that was intended to reflect all of those lots. I also note for you the municipal trees, notwithstanding the fact that they're currently being treated for emerald ash borer, will be retained. The driveway locations have been designed to preserve the trees. And I also call to your attention, of course, the criteria in 5124 of the Planning Act, which is the test by which you assess this application, having regard for development matters of provincial interest in Section 2. We went through that, the PPS and the growth plan. I submit to you that the proposed consent is not premature, and it is in the public interest, given that it does in fact implement the very regulations and policies that were put forward by the official plan and the zoning bylaw, that it does conform to the official plan and opinion shared by planning staff here within the town. The suitability of the land is for residential purposes. The dimensions and shapes of the proposed lots, which conform to the official plan, we're not creating odd-shaped lots. Very quickly, the interrelationship between the design of the proposed plan and site plan control, both the severed lot and the retained lot will be the subject of site plan control. Now, Mr. Chair, if you're going to cut me off, which of course is the time period, I would like an opportunity. I haven't had a chance to address a number of the issues raised by the residents. So either now or in reply, I would like the opportunity on behalf of my client to reply to the concerns raised by the residents.
Yes, we'll hear from the community and then invite you back. But at this point, committee members, any questions for the applicant? No. Okay, thank you, Ms. Baker.
Thank you.
So I suspect it's going to be most of this side of the room. Okay, I see a show of hands of people who have an interest in this application. Okay, well, we'd appreciate it if you'd have one or two spokespeople. You're all welcome to speak, but we would ask that you try not to repeat what the previous speakers have said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gordon Petch. I live at 251 Carolyn Drive. You have my materials previously. I have some additional materials to provide to the committee if I could bring those up.
Secretary Treasurer will take them from you.
And what you have before you is the written submission, and I've attached some sections of the official plan, and my letter deals with those sections of the official plan. As well, when I was advised by staff that the applicant was not obliged to provide a concept plan showing how two homes would sit on these two lots and how they would possibly comply with zoning and what the impact of such would be, I retained an architect to do that. And so on this plan that's attached to the letter, you can see the two homes that would comply with the setback requirements at their minimums. And importantly, you can see home number 64, which is in Highland, and home number 244, which is on Carolyn, which are the two homes that abut.
Excuse me, sir. Could you put a copy of this up on the screen so the audience could see it?
I'll need some help doing that. Thank you. It's a little faint to see like that. But basically, if someone like myself who doesn't own the corner lot, the impact to me would be if my neighbor put a home in the backyard. So I lose my backyard, which is what happens to the home on Highland, and to a lesser degree, but still significant, on Carolyn. And we're in a neighborhood that I moved into only a few years ago because it was so stable. The lots were big enough that the homes that were being put up, even though bigger, fit in because they all had big backyards. You could buffer yourself with space and maintain privacy. Now what we're looking at is really homes with no backyards, and they will become no usable backyard. You got 24 feet on one and 11 feet on the other, as opposed to lots that have 150 feet in depth. And it's a clever idea in terms of speculation. But this is the type of detached home you find in Midtown or North. These are the few detached homes, but when you get them, you don't get a backyard and you get a brick wall for a neighbor. And you get a brick wall at the back. Now there's hundreds of them if somebody wants to buy them, and there's hundreds of thousands of people wanting to buy them. But we don't have to do that in a community like this where it is not in an intensification area. It is a stable community. We ought to have a choice whether we want a home, such as in Midtown in the growth plan intensification areas, or in these older areas. You shouldn't be going in there and giving the slippery slope to developers who are very wise about how to do this. And believe me, I act for many developers. And I know this is a slippery slope because those corner lots, whether they're 50 feet, 60 feet, or 70 feet, as long as they got that 100 foot of depth, they're coming in. And you'll watch all these corner lots get bought up, and the neighbors beside them, their values will go down because people do not want to have to face that application in the future. Because on the corner lot, your only backyard is your side yard, right? And if you're beside the side yard, that's your privacy from that neighbor. Now that's going to be a brick wall. It's one thing to say, oh, well, the application conforms with the zoning bylaw. But as I've said on page 2 of my letter, the OP requires more than that. The OP requires that you conform to all relevant policies of the official plan. That's in the first full paragraph on page 2, right in the middle. Firstly, the severance, the consent must be compatible with adjacent lots, and this surely is not compatible. And secondly, it must conform to all relevant policies of the official plan. And if you go down to the bullets on that page, I quote, and I've attached the sections right out of the official plan about there's an obligation to maintain, preserve, enhance, protect the character and the living environment of these neighborhoods. You must maintain the existing neighborhood structure. This is not a growth area, development area. You must maintain, protect, enhance the characteristics of the existing residential area. And then the most on-point points for us is A and B. The development shall be compatible with setbacks, orientation, and separation distances. We do not have setbacks similar to all the lots in this area. Namely, you may have a setback for a rear lot line, from a rear lot line. But what's missing in this old bylaw is the bylaw doesn't recognize minimum depths. of 125 feet. It doesn't recognize it, so you can slip in there because that should have been in that bylaw. And it says setbacks orientation. This new house will be orientated unlike the corner lot. It will become the backyard neighbor for the house on Highland and to a significant degree on Carolyn. And most importantly, in D, where applicable, the proposed lotting pattern of development shall be compatible with the predominant lotting pattern of the surrounding neighborhood. That cannot happen with this lot. You do not find lots like this in this neighborhood with 15 feet or 24 feet for a backyard. You've got relief because you got a corner lot for a side yard and a rear yard on flankage down to 11 and 3.5 meters. So this is just an invasion into an established neighborhood. It's not in the public interest. It doesn't conform with your official plan. It's a slippery slope. My goodness, they'll be in here. They'll buy all these darn corner lots and you'll be chasing it. The next step, well, if we can get away with severing the front, then why don't we try severing it down the middle? Because we can maintain the lot area, we'll just get ourselves a minor variance from a 75-foot lot down to a 37.5-foot lot, and we'll be the same thing as this corner lot. We won't have to worry about the backyards. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate I'm over my time a bit.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Charleville?
Yeah, sir, that was a very good presentation. This is always a tough one. But one of the things you kept saying a few times that there weren't any other lots like that, but the town has put forward 2 lots that are immediately adjacent to this property, not on your side, but on the other side. And a couple of other lots just not far away up the street. And I'm just, I drove around the area, but I wanted to get your opinion on that. So how does that relate back to there are no lots like this?
No, I'm saying that the way the official plans read is a predominant lotting in the neighborhood. Now, clearly, these are large lots. 50, minimum you'll see is 50 by 100, but predominantly it's 55 all the way up to 75 to 150 or more. That's what I'm saying. That's the predominant lot. What you don't see in there is a lot such as what we have here that has is 78 by 71. You don't see that.
But yet the 2 lots that are adjacent to it, just to the south of the thing, are exactly that same size.
No, they're not. See, they're much deeper. They're twice as deep as that. If you look at the lot on Highland and the owner's here, that lot is the same depth as this whole lot that's being subdivided.
I'm not seeing that on my stuff, so I apologize. I see it as just, on the report that I received, admittedly, I didn't go in the back of everybody's, house here, but in the thing that I received, the depth of the width of the lot and the depth of the lot, the depth is slightly, just a tad deeper, but for all intents and purposes, the same. And I'm not trying to make a big deal of it. I'm just trying to get back to your point about that there's nothing in this area, but the 2 lots immediately adjacent to it seem to be the same size as these lots that would be created.
Sir,
And
I think we're...
they would run the whole gamut from the street all the way along, I apologize, that would be Carolyn Drive. So the
Could we
4
go to-
houses, it would be 4 houses on Carolyn Drive, all the same size.
Could we go to page 8 in the staff report? And there's a plan there.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, if the depth of those lots, and the neighbors are here, and I'd prefer they speak to it because you're taking an aerial photo here.
Right, I know.
Okay. But it's deeper and wider than what you're getting when you sever the red lot in half. Okay, and the lot that's on Highland, which is the most affected, its backyard is the entire width, if you like, of this corner lot, which will now have a backyard in the rear half of its backyard. Or it'll have a house in the rear half of its backyard. Can you see that?
I don't.
If you can see to the, where the red rectangle is, the street, if you like, towards the top of the page to the north, that's Highland.
So you've just taken it off the screen here. It's like, I see it's kind of adjusted. I can't see where
Oh,
you're
I'm sorry.
drawing now. There's the driveway there.
Well, it's here. This
Right.
lot here,
Yeah,
that is 64 Highland, okay? Now, you can see the depth of that lot is twice the depth
I agree.
of the
No,
two separate lots.
yeah, that one I'm not just, it's the one that are in blue, the
Okay.
two that are in blue, which face Carolyn. that
Now,
are
the
same
lot that's
size.
in blue, the first lot, which is 244, you can see it gets its space from this corner lot by the side yard of the existing corner lot. It gets its buffer.
But the lot is the same size as, roughly, as what would be created of the two.
Well, I'll let the neighbor speak to that.
Okay, all right.
Okay? But that house gets its buffer.
Our lot's 40 feet.
Pardon?
We're 40 feet deeper.
Okay. I'm being told it's 43 feet deeper.
43 feet deeper. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you can see what happens to the lot on Carolyn is that its buffer was the backyard, or which was really the side yard of the corner house. That's how it got its space. Now there's going to be a house right there. Okay? So it has no buffer from this house. And even though it's the biggest of the two lots. So you can carve it up, but this isn't what was intended to happen in this neighborhood. And this is what will happen in this neighborhood if you do this.
I'm at a loss because the house, I don't want to labor it too much, but that one house you're talking about, I mean, obviously the owner of that house could tear it down and build a much larger house.
That's
and
right.
it would be in exactly the same sort of configuration. I mean, you've drawn two houses here, I'm assuming that they're to the maximum permitted
That's
under
right.
the zoning bylaw.
That's right.
And I share your same frustration of not knowing what the two houses will look like. It's one of the most frustrating things I find when I'm trying to look at consents. But nothing stops that person to the south there from tearing his building down and building a building, I guess, of similar size and similar setbacks and similar everything. And he would be perfectly permitted, he'd be permitted to do it under the bylaw.
Well, but you're hearing he's got almost 43 feet more in depth. And I'll let the neighbor speak to that because I am not that neighbor.
I'm not seeing it, but I see a little bit more in depth. But you know what, unfortunately, I don't want to make any judgment because I don't have these measurements and I don't know. And you're right, I am only looking at a diagram here. So I will reserve judgment on that one. Thank you. Okay, that was actually my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. Ms. Mihalovich? Sorry. You received a copy of the drawing that the deputy put up? On the proposed corner lot, it would appear that it's being shown as having a front yard and 3 side yards and no rear yard. Is that an accurate representation of what the bylaw requires, or is the yard adjacent to number 64 would have to be considered a rear yard with a greater setback than what's shown here?
Just 1 second. Just want to make sure I get it right. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the material that the resident has provided is, from my understanding of the zoning bylaw, I don't interpret the bylaw, just to preface that, I'm not a zoning examiner. However, In the instances where someone does have a corner lot, there are certain allowances, but also certain restrictions that apply to a corner lot with respect to the yard. So for example, when you have a flankage yard, you are required to provide a greater setback to the flankage yard than you otherwise would provide in your interior yard. So for example, the applicant or the resident has indicated on the corner lot or the resulting corner lot that there would be an interior side yard of 3 meters, which is incorrect. That interior side yard would be less. The flankage yard then is at 3.5 meters, which is the highland portion. When it comes to rear yard, the expectation is that the rear yard could be reduced to 3.5 meters where there is the interior side yard of 3 meters. However, there is still the coverage requirements for the property in of itself. And you'll note that the resident has also indicated that the 35% footprint is about 2,086 square feet. But the footprint he's drawn here is well above that at 2,300 square feet. So the fact of the matter is that a building at that maximum lot coverage would likely provide greater setbacks than what the building footprint is allowing here. I would also suggest to you that the building footprint that's actually been provided by the applicant in their submissions, which indicates a proper rear yard setback, is what was used for the basis of our assessment on the application and what we would expect to see with the site plan application. So on page 9 of staff's comments, you will note that the applicant is actually proposing to provide 1.2 meter interior side yard and therefore providing a 7.5 meter rear yard, the 3.5 meter flankage, and a front yard setback that would also be consistent with the bylaw.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think I got my answer. The footprint depicted on this submission is larger than what would be built in reality.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to address the committee? Yes, ma'am, please come up. We can get your name and address, please.
I will. Hello, Mr. Chairman. I'm Carol McMahon, and I reside at 244 Carolyn Drive. So hence the lot dimensions. So I agree with everything that Mr. Pesh said and his concerns. My additional concern is about water damage and drainage. So our little neighborhood is rife with an underground river and underground streams. The house actually in question, when the basement was dug out, had a number of floods and serious water damage, and that impacted our house. We've had to install 2 sump pumps in order to deal with the underground water is just too close to the surface. So I've gone through all the documents that were posted online. I have not seen any information that addresses the potential for water damage or an assessment for how that might be dealt with by digging into this water table and creating a second basement, and nothing to indemnify the neighbors for the damage that this may cause to our property. So I'm hoping that you can defer your decision until this issue can be explored. It's, if the town looks into it, you'll find that it's a serious concern in the entire neighborhood, but very specifically in this little corner where there was a river diverted, and the river up at the top of the street by the park, which flowed there, was diverted this way and impacts all of the houses in its line. So in addition to the concerns you've heard, my concern is about water damage and being protected from that. And I just also want to state too that we bought in this neighborhood 7 years ago. We could have bought north and had a much larger house. We bought because we love the green space, and right now we overlook grass, a swimming pool, and green trees. And if this application is approved, we'll look at a brick wall. So I'm asking you to consider the concerns of the neighborhood as well. And thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none?
No. Does the town have a plan of the underwater river and the streams? Is that part of the, when we bought our house, I'm a title searcher, so when we bought our house, I was surprised that I didn't see anything in the town plan about the impact of this water.
It's not the jurisdiction of this committee. The town does have site alteration processes, which assure when new houses are built that the grading is done in such a way that the water does not impact the adjacent properties.
Yeah.
That's not for this committee.
No, but it's not actually a grading issue. It's the fact that when you add a second basement, you create more stress on those underground streams. It's not the grade that's going to deal with the problem. But thank you for listening to my concerns.
I'm just gonna add one thing to that. I mean, one of the difficulties we face here is that we're only being asked to look at the division of two pieces of land. And like you, we lack, we have some context here of what could potentially be built or what might be anticipated to be built, but we can't see it. But one of the things that is in here is each one of these buildings is subject to site plan approval, which means that there's a much more thorough analysis of what will be built on the building once the applicant decides to come forward and do that. But it's not really for us to decide on that.
No, but I'm hoping that you will not agree to sever the land so that we won't have to bear that impact. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the committee? Get your name and address, please, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chair and committee. Ed Howell. I reside at 64 Highland Road, the property just to the west of 254 Carolyn. I moved into the neighborhood June 1986, so I've resided there for 32 years with my 3 daughters and 2 dogs on occasion. We've had 4 of them all told, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. We've had 7 different occupants in the neighbor at 254 Carolyn, and the current owner of the home, less than 2 years. So of the 20 neighbors that were sent the notification, I think the 14 objections speaks highly of what we are objecting. I read with interest online the staff opinion saying that this was not compatible, or that is compatible with the surrounding lot fabric. And I think all you need to do is drive around the neighborhood and see that any sort of severance and putting up 2 large 2-story houses is not compatible with the surrounding fabric at all. We have no objection to coming in and buying lots and putting up a large 2-story home on the existing property, but to sever and put up 2 of those large homes would have a severe impact. So I reside directly to the west, and it would have a huge negative impact on A, privacy on my yard, and B, the natural light and shading of my yard. We also have 2 huge, large maple trees right on the lot line, one just to the east of my driveway, which would sit directly behind the new lot, or the new home being built on the corner. The 3.5 meters would encroach on the root system of that tree and could jeopardize the well-being of the tree in the future. There's also another large maple tree in my backyard, which would be 7 meters from the new 2-story home that would be built, and I believe have the same impact. It would jeopardize the root system and jeopardize the life of the tree in the long run. I can also speak to Carol's point with regards to drainage. I put an addition on my home in 1999-2000, and I had to install a triple safe sump pump in the backyard because of the underground water table issues that we do have. I know 254 Carolyn has a sump pump. As a matter of fact, when they were having their issues, I referred my basement guy, sump pump guy, to the previous owner, and I know their sump pump runs on a regular basis, and it diverts out to Highland Road into the catch basin that we've got in the ditch there. There is tremendous amount of water issues in the neighborhood, which Carol spoke to. And again, demolishing the home, I don't think is going to be a problem, but demolishing the pool, I have a pool in my backyard, Carol has a pool in her backyard, and I think the ramifications long-term, diverting the water and upsetting the current drainage would have huge impacts on both of our homes. And I'd just like to close and say, this is not compatible with the current adjacent properties, what's going on. I know, Mark, you mentioned that perhaps we could tear down our homes and build bigger homes. That's not what we want to do here. And to Gordon's point, my lot's 75 by 150. Where does it stop? Can I sever my house down, my lot down the middle and build 2 homes? I don't think you'll see a stoppage in acquiring larger lots and moving forward and severing them and putting up these huge McMansion, these 2 stories that invade on the privacy, steal our sun, steal the shade that we need. And there are many, many huge trees on our properties that will be severely impacted if you build this close to the property lines. So I've just put this up and just penciled in where the trees are, just to the east of my home. And you can see how close that one on the north side would be lot 1, 3.5 meters from a brick wall. So that will look into my front windows where my daughter has a bedroom and where we have a bedroom. And then the large home in the back would look directly into both my daughter's bedrooms in the back, our swimming pool, our deck, our hot tub, the trampoline. It's just a huge invasion of privacy, which we don't agree with. And we would strongly urge the committee not to move forward with this severance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Charlevoix?
Not really a question, but I do want to point out that that particular diagram, when Gordon came up here and presented, and I think the staff went against it, the diagram of this 3.5 meters would violate the bylaws. So I don't really think it's a fair representation. The bylaw and the diagrams that were shown in the reports show a 7.5 meter setback on each of them. Again, I get you. I understand what you're going at. I just don't want everyone to get confused with this particular diagram as being a fait accompli, because that would not be permitted under existing bylaws, and it's not what the owner, showed as a building envelope that he was going to build within. I'd love to see the building too. That's, I'm going to keep saying that all night. That's my biggest frustration. But that's not an accurate depiction of what is permitted. The footprint is too large. It violates the bylaw. The rear yard is too small. It violates the bylaw. So it's not correct. The building to the right is a little bit more in line with what would be permitted.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to address the committee? One last time, anyone else like to address the committee? If not, I'll invite Ms. Baker back to address the comments she's heard.
And so, thank you, because I do raise the same concerns with respect to the use of the diagram that was put before the committee. And if I could ask IT to dim the lights, please. This is the site plan that was put before the committee and to the town for the evaluation. So elevations haven't been depicted because, of course, as mentioned, both of these lots have to go through site plan. It's a clear demonstration that lots can be built on this property without any need for variances. So the zoning bylaw, as I mentioned previously, evaluated the character of this neighborhood and put in regulations and standards in which to implement that character of the neighborhood as set out in the official plan. This is what complies with the zoning bylaw. 7.5 meter rear yard setbacks, 3.6 meter flankage yard setback, 1.2 interior yard setbacks, and the front yard setback is in the nature, I know this measurement, it's on an angle, but it's in the nature of 9 meters. So I would ask, frankly, that the committee pay no attention to what can be characterized, nothing else, as misleading, the drawing that was put forward by my friend, Mr. Petch. I'd also like to address a couple of issues. This has been characterized as a stable neighborhood. Nobody disputes that, but stable is not equated with static, as we know. And the growth plan, of course, requires intensification throughout the built boundary, not just in Midtown, not just in North Oakville, but throughout the built boundary. And this is, in fact, an example, an excellent example, I submit to you, of gentle intensification within the built boundary. Mr. Petch brought you to a policy in the official plan, which he identified as being critical, maintaining setbacks, orientation, and separation distances. And I'm going to take you, and I do note very much exactly, you have indicated that this is an air photo. The condition on the 2 blue lots and the proposed condition on the red lot will be almost virtually duplicated. That has been checked against Geo Warehouse. The blue lots are in fact slightly longer than the red lot, but not materially. And so the lot that Mr. Petch spent a lot of time on, this lot here, and I believe the owner of that property just spoke, will now have 2 lots just identical to the condition for this lot in particular. The question was put before you. I have a 45-foot, or a 75, foot frontage. I have to confess, I don't speak feet, so I had to do a quick conversion. That converts to a 22.86 meter frontage. That lot couldn't be severed. That would result in 2 lots well below an 18-meter frontage severance. And in fact, their existing lot frontage is just slightly larger than the proposed severed lots. I just want to quickly address the issues of water damage and drainage. As mentioned, both these lots are required to go through site plan approval, and of course, Section 41 of the Planning Act specifically deals with those issues, and those issues will be dealt with in that forum. In terms of the preservation and trees, of course, the site alteration process and the site plan process will require, and in fact the staff reports makes mention of it in the comments, they will require TPZs, tree protection zones, and the associated hoarding to ensure that abutting trees are protected, both municipal and private trees in that regard. In terms of the comments about sump pumps, I would say that that's outside of the board's jurisdiction, or sorry, the committee's jurisdiction here. Lots of lots in Oakville have sump pumps. It's not unique to this area. Certainly, it's replete throughout Old Oakville generally. Again, issues associated with the demolishing of the pool. Those are issues that are also dealt with in site alt and are, again, not uncommon. Pools are filled in Oakville all of the time. And of course, natural light and shading are 2 items that are also dealt with very specifically through a very, and I say this, a very rigorous site plan process, which is to come. This all is resulting in, based on the footprints that we've shown you, in 2 modestly sized homes. They are not McMansions. They can't be McMansions due to the coverage limitations. Modern sized homes on the lots. And thank you for your time this evening.
Mr. Chairman, while my friend is here, I didn't get a response to answer the question. I know I've been told I've produced a misleading document. I'd just like the committee to look at section 6.3.15. And it says, the minimum rear yard shall be reduced to 3.5 meters on a corner lot where the interior side yard of 3 meters is provided. And it says it shall be reduced to 3.5 meters. So it's not misleading, and that's what he's allowed to do.
No,
Thank you, sir. I just didn't want to be told I misled anybody because it's right in the bylaw.
Okay, I hate to speak for staff, but I believe the explanation that staff gave did address that issue, but that when doing that, you far exceed the coverage that's permitted by the bylaw. So in that sense, the building envelope that's drawn could not be accommodated because of coverage. That's the point that staff made, and she's nodding in agreement. So,
well, just think about, Mr. Chairman, that's 300 square feet we're talking about. So that will be immaterial to the footprint of this building if it's reduced by 300 feet. Thank you.
Okay,
Square
thank
feet.
you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, with that, we'll close discussion. Committee, you've got a tale of two applications. Planning staff and the applicant believing or indicating that the application conforms with both the official plan and the bylaw, and the community clearly indicating they do not feel that this application is compatible. With that, I'm happy to entertain a motion. Mr. Charlevoix.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to look at some of my notes here, but I'm always of the opinion that our planning process has somehow failed us when we get so many people that come out and turn up in person or on paper to object. And so my natural inclination is to always look at all these things to see if I can support my fellow citizens in their frustrations here. When we look at this, we do take into account everything, including the applicant's rights and needs, the town's wants and needs, as well as the neighbors' wants and needs. And the greatest difficulty when we're looking at severances in this area, or in any of these areas down here, is rarely do we get an opportunity to see what's going to be built. And sometimes if you could see what was being built, you go, oh, that's okay. But you can't. And there's no requirement on the part of the developer to do it. In this particular case, the developer has taken the time to show a couple of driveways, some orientation, a little bit of a building envelope. But I'll be honest with you, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to do it that way. It's just the way they're showing it. I mean, it all looks good. So working within these constraints, I have to look at everything here. And the first thing is starting off with what was mentioned by the applicant, which is the provincial guidelines with respect to growth in this area. Although this is not a growth area, there are specific legislations and rules that deal with trying to create additional coverage in existing areas. And quite frankly, this meets it. That one I can't argue with. This, in my opinion, this falls under those rules. It would also seem that this thing is in compliance with the official plan. I do note that the official plan does permit the municipality to question what the proposed buildings or structures would look like on these lands. And I think from their point of view, the municipality is taking the stand that they're going to use the site plan process to do that. And it's irritating, but I can't say that it's not a legal process and that it won't be satisfactory in the end, because I just don't know. In addition, the town has taken the opportunity to point out that there are two lots to the south that are similar in size. It's also pointed out a couple of other lots in the area that are similar in size, and also went the extra step to point out another 4 lots which they believe are up for severance. I don't know if that's a message, but they could potentially be severed also. And I can't come up with any reason to think that the final product that's going to be developed here, that the municipality through the site plan process is not going to pay a lot of attention to compatibility and making sure that this happens. Typically, lots of times you don't require a site plan to build a building, which means the municipality can't look at everything as much. In this case, they're permitted to go quite in depth into the whole character of the building. So I can't say that the building won't look good. So I can only look at these land lots and determine whether under the provincial guidelines, the official plan, and then finally the zoning, they're permitted. And I do note that from a zoning perspective, the applicant is not looking for any variances of any kind. This doesn't always happen. Many, many times when people come in front of us for consents, there are variances at the same time with respect to lot coverage and lot frontage. Not coverage, sorry, but frontage. So on that basis, although I find the process sometimes disturbing, I cannot come up with any reason why this committee would not go forward with this particular application. We may not like it, as neighbors we may not like it, but it does follow all the rules that I can see. So Mr. Chairman, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submissions, as well as the town's written staff reports, the comments from the applicant, the great presentations actually from the public, both orally and in writing. I find myself being influenced primarily by the town as the experts in this area with respect to the rules and regulations that apply to our provincial guidelines, our official plan, and our zoning bylaw. So having considered the matters set out under Section 5124 of the Planning Act, as amended, I believe the application conforms to the official plan and zoning bylaws, and I recommend that the application be approved, subject to the provision that the applicant must fulfill all of the conditions under Schedule A.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah,
Mr. Hardcastle.
yeah, I'd just like to briefly, I'd like to briefly chime in and just thank staff for a thorough, comprehensive report on this, as well as the residents for their input and the applicant. Much like Mr. Charlebois, when I'm looking at these applications, I tend to focus on the issue of compatibility. It's key in within the policy regime that's applicable, including the Livable Oakville plan. And I like to highlight the fact that compatibility, by definition, is not development which is necessarily the same as or similar to the existing development, but can coexist with the surrounding area without causing adverse impact. And it's on that I'd just like to raise the point about, sorry, I'm having a problem with the feedback here. I'd like to raise the point with respect to those matters that were raised by the residents. I think, while valid points, there are other processes whereby which a lot of those concerns can be addressed. And I did not hear any matters of impact that are directly related to the matter at hand, the consent application. So I'll be supporting the motion put on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. If I can just speak to Mr. Charlebois' concern, and as you know, I've had the same concern in the past, the frustration of not being able to have drawings for a severance application that complies with the bylaw. And as Ms. Mihalovich knows, I've debated this with her at length in the past, and the reality of the situation is the site plan process is far more rigorous, and it is put in place to deal with all the nuances, and the committee cannot tie an approval to a set of drawings that's subject to site plan approval. So, and you don't want an applicant coming before you and showing a set of drawings which may end up being something completely different once the site plan committee gets through with its process. So while it seems like sometimes we don't have enough information, that is the process that we have to deal with, and the site plan process will deal with all those details of the actual houses that are being proposed. So I just wanted to make that point clear. It's not that the applicants are refusing to bring drawings forward, it's the process that doesn't allow for it when we have to go through site plan approval as well. So with that, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve? Seeing nobody opposed, that application is approved. I'd like to call application CAV A042 at 1259, oh, I'm sorry, it's 40 at 2258 Whistling Springs Crescent. The applicant could come forward. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. We'll just give the room a minute to clear. So. Okay, sir, if we can get your name and address, please.
My name is Terrence O'Brien. I'm speaking on behalf of the homeowner, Tanya and Jamie Paris at 2258 Whistling Springs Crescent in Oakville. I am a representative of Pool Doctors, the company that will be installing the swimming pool that is encroaching on the flankage line.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody in the audience that has an interest in this application? Seeing none, committee members, would you like a presentation on this matter? No, it's not required, so therefore I will entertain a motion. Mr. Charlotte, or Mr. Hardcastle, just don't
Thank you.
drop the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully we can do this with a little less feedback. Having reviewed the staff report and the materials and undertaken a site visit, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions. That the first being that the proposed in-ground pool be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 9th, 2018, as submitted. And the second being actually that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Noting that there were no members of the public present to make deputations or written submissions received with respect to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Seeing no one opposed, that application is approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now call CAV A042 at 1259 Hillhurst Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnarr & Associates. Our mailing address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Suite 700, and postal code L5R3K6. Before I get started into my presentation, Mr. Chair, I may want to point out a very minor error in the staff report should the committee choose to approve it, and that's with respect to the recommendation, specifically the date of the drawings. Through the review of the application, zoning staff did identify a miscalculation with respect to the GFA calculation. Everything in front of you with respect to the drawings is correct. It's just that the date in the staff report should read the February 23rd, 2018 drawings. I just wanted to point that out for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Capper. Just ask if there's anyone in the audience with an interest in this application. You're in opposition? Okay, Mr. Capper, I believe the presentation's in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for this evening, and I'd like to walk you through that this evening. Just for the records, sir, our firm has been retained through Steve Hamlin Architecture on behalf of the property owners, Elena Danikova and Dmitry Lakutin. Elena is here this evening, and she can certainly answer any questions that I can't. With respect to the property in question, the municipal address is 1259 Hillhurst Road. It is immediately adjacent to St. Vincent Catholic Elementary School, and it's on the north side of Hillhurst Road, as highlighted in red here. With respect to the variances that are before you this evening, the request is for 2 variances. The first variance seeks an increase in the maximum permitted residential floor area. The increase being sought is 3.61% above what's permitted in the zoning bylaw, which would allow, if approved, for an additional 556 square feet of floor area. The second variance seeks a permission for a minimum front yard setback of 9.16 meters. I'm going to go into detail on the front yard setback as well as the other variants, but I'd just like to walk you very quickly through the drawings. This is the site plan for the proposed dwelling, and what I will note of the proposed site plan is that the existing zoning regulations with respect to side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, lot coverage, and all other provisions are either fully compliant with the zoning bylaw or exceed the minimum requirements of the zoning bylaw. With respect to coverage, there's an additional 1.13% of coverage that's permissible on the property versus what is being proposed. With respect to the design of the building, certainly the staff comments note that the building has been designed with what I call the Oakville aesthetic. The roof line has been, the second story of the building has been recessed into the roof line. And with respect to the front elevation, I'd like to point out a general observation with respect to what I'll call the three bays. There are the two main bays that are proposed with the main dwelling. That's this bay here and this bay here. The second bay is the front entrance and porch, and then the third one is with respect to the garage for the proposed dwelling. This is the rear elevation proposed. The westerly elevation. This is the side of the property that abuts the property of Mr. and Mr. Maitland, which you would have received comments for. And this is the easterly side of the dwelling, which is the side that abuts the St. Vincent Catholic Elementary School. With respect to the front yard setback proposed, you'll note that the shown in red is the existing building setback, which is 13.04 meters. As of right, the zoning bylaw allows for an additional minus 1 meter of leeway, if you will, for the front yard setback. The first bay that I referred to in the elevation is actually set at 12.11 meters. And that is the two, what I would identify as the two main faces or main facades of the dwelling. The third one which I identified is the garage facade, and that is set back at 11.19 meters. That is 85 centimeters short of what is permitted as of right, and that's shown in this little undulation here. The intent there is to allow for undulation in the building and make it look like it has some relief. And then the variance that's before you this evening seeks a reduction to 9.16 meters. That dimension is from the front property line to the columns for the overhang for the front porch. So it doesn't reflect the true building setback. It's an architectural feature that's intended to enhance the front elevation for the building. Now I have visited the site this morning. I did have a chance to speak with Mr. Maitland. We had a very frank and honest discussion. I fully appreciate the concerns that he's raised and the comments that he made. However, I have to disagree with respect to the impact of the proposed dwelling with respect to sunlight. This is a view looking westward down Hillhurst Road, and one of the things you'll notice is that you can't see either of the houses. In fact, I've had to point them out for anyone looking at this photo. What you will notice is that there's a significantly high row of trees that abuts the east, that runs along the easterly property line for the subject dwelling. That is the subject dwelling and the row of trees which I've just described along the east property line. That is, again, a view of those trees looking eastward towards the trees. And this is actually the orientation. If I oriented myself so that I was looking at the path of travel for the sun. This is an east to west orientation. And what you'll note is that the height of the trees, not only the trees to the east on the property line, but also the two trees that are in the front yard of the property, they're significantly tall. It is spring. Those trees are not in full leaf yet. My submission to Mr. Maitland was that, although I appreciate the concern with respect to loss of sunshine, the reality is with the natural environment that exists on this site, by the time the sun has risen to the point that it has actually cleared those trees, the height of the building proposed will no longer be relevant with respect to a shadowing impact. The trees are substantially higher than the proposed dwelling at 9 meters. This is a shot, and this is my last slide very quickly, Mr. Chair. This is a shot of the rear yard. The response to the concern of Mr. Maitland with respect to the front yard setback and the potential impact that it's going to have on sunlight penetration into his rear yard. The as-of-right response to that concern is to shift the building into the rear yard and comply with the front yard setback. There's certainly sufficient distance in the rear yard to accommodate that required setback. However, in doing that, what you do is you in fact introduce building mass in the rear yard. You introduce two windows that have an overview into his rear yard. The proposal as it stands right now lines the proposed building with the rear yard setback for the existing building. And it's my submission to the committee that that is a better planning solution to what the as-of-right situation would allow for. Forgive me, I've gone over time. Finally, it's my submission that the application before you meets the four tests in the Planning Act, and I'm happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Capper. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, we'll invite the neighbors up to speak. We can get your name and address, please.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is Frances Maitland. I live at 1251 Hillhurst Road. Unfortunately, my husband couldn't be here tonight. He got called into work last minute, so otherwise he would have been here to speak, but I will speak on his behalf. So obviously we have some concerns, as this gentleman just mentioned, that we are concerned about the access to natural light. We feel this property will really impede upon that. I know you've made a case that we don't get natural light, and it won't infringe on that, but we do. We get a lot, and we've actually scoped it out ourselves and taken a few photos, which I'm not sure if we have to unplug this, that I can show.
Mr. Capper, or IT, there we go. Okay, so where it says place document?
Yeah.
That'll work. Perfect.
So the property, as you can, I can't really see if you can see, but it's right here is their property right now. So by pushing it forward, this is in the morning, and that's when we get the light. So regardless of those massive evergreen trees that we see lining the schoolyard, that has nothing to do with the sunlight that we're talking about. We're talking about the sunlight you can see in this photo that we get every morning, that we quite enjoy in the morning, sitting out having our coffee beside the pool deck. So this will definitely infringe upon that. Here's another photo we have that is taken actually from right where the house is proposed to be built. You can see there's a ton of light there. And it has nothing to do with the trees that were just pointed out. It will definitely have a negative impact moving forward beyond the existing bylaws. So I'll keep it short and sweet. We really feel that this will negatively impact us. It does not align with the frontage of the rest of the street. It really will not conform with the setting and of all the adjacent homes within this street. So not only from the lighting perspective, but I feel like just the whole street's going to look off with this one house protruding out. We're not opposed to building of new construction. It's going to happen, especially in our neighborhood. We have a lot of bungalows, so it's going to happen. But we're just asking that we remain within bylaw and within guidelines, because it will stick out and it will affect us negatively. So, yeah, that's about it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Seeing that you showed that to the committee, we now own it, so the Secretary Treasurer is going to come take it from you.
I have more too. I just thought I wouldn't
Before
take
you
my full
leave,
5 minutes.
I think there's a question. Mr. Charlewell's got his mic on.
Francis, a couple of things, because I'm going to ask the applicant when he comes back to deal with the front of the house a bit, but what do you think of the comment that he made about if I move the building back in compliance, I just keep moving the building back into your backyard? It seemed a valid enough statement. I'm just wondering if you thought about that. And
We have,
you're fine with it.
And we have no issue with that.
So you're okay with the building moving back into
We
your
have no
backyard?
issue with, yeah,
Okay.
we were fine with that. We really feel that moving a few feet forward is going to really affect our natural light. We really do, and that's important to us. We have bedrooms on the side of that house. So moving back, we have no issue with that whatsoever.
Okay. I'm going to get him to go over the measurements again, because I saw it, no, I just don't recall, but he did put forward the idea that the garage and the porch was just a little bit ahead, but the problem was that the bylaw was being done to a couple of columns that were in the porch. I don't know if you picked up on that, so I'm going to get him to
Yeah,
show me
and
that
because
again.
my understanding in looking at that, I'm not an expert at looking
Yeah.
at drawings, but to me, the garage is a full wall right to the, where they're asking it
Yeah,
end,
I
right?
think you're right.
And that's what's going to affect our lighting.
Okay.
So I'm not really, the columns to me are, I'm indifferent to that.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if it's possible if I might refer to the photo that was presented. I just would like to, perhaps I think it would be helpful in
We'll
terms
get
of
that for you.
mitigating the concern. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that the shadow from this tree over here is the tree that is located and shown on the survey right here. Okay. This is the corner of the shed, and unfortunately, I will try to zoom in. I can get some assistance from our colleagues in the IT department. Okay, I shall have to draw it in. There's a tree that is shown on the site plan based on surveyed information that is shown there. That tree appears to be the one that is shown, the shadow, begging your pardon, of that tree appears to be the one shown in the image. I've drawn as straight a line as I can freehand, showing the line from that tree to the corner of the shed, which is shown in the photo. I've drawn the same corresponding line from the corner of the dwelling parallel to that line. And so my position to you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, that begging your pardon, that I also question the time of day that these photos are taken. I think they're taken very early in the morning. It appears to me, based on the shadows, that this is very early on the morning. And it's my position that the shadow from the proposed dwelling would reach approximately there in terms of at a comparable time as to when this photo was taken. And if I could very quickly ask for our colleagues in the IT department to flip me back to the desktop, I'd like to just run through those slides to answer Mr. Charlebo's question. Thank you. With respect to the proposed front yard setback, the existing building is set back at 13.04 meters. The zoning bylaw allows for existing setbacks minus 1 meter as of right. The as of right front yard setback at its closest for this property is 12.04 meters. When I described the three bays, the first bay that I described were the two main bays which make up the main facade of the dwelling. Those are set back at 12.11 meters, which exceeds the minimum requirement of 12.04 meters. With respect to the setback for the garage, begging your pardon, the garage, which is set back from the side lot line, 5.01 meters. It is set back from the front property line at 11.19 meters, which is 85 centimeters greater than what is permitted as of right. The width of that garage is only 6.71 meters. The variance, as it's required under the zoning bylaw, because it measures the closest part of the structure to the front property line, is measured to the two columns which support the overhang for the front porch. That distance is 9.16 meters. As you can see, just visually, over 50% of the front facade of the dwelling actually meets and exceeds the minimum requirement. About 30% of it is within 85 centimeters of what's required, and then the remainder falls within the 9.16 meters. I trust that's helpful in answering your question, Mr. Charlebois, through Mr. Chair. One other thing that I wanted to point out for a matter of procedure, I'm not sure that the committee received the additional letters of support that were received late this afternoon. Okay, perfect. I note that there were 2 letters of support as well as comments from the Halton District Catholic School Board.
So, Mr. Capper, Mr. Charlebois asked the neighbor an excellent question in response to your submission that moving the house forward provides a better relationship with the adjacent property, and the neighbor disagreed. With that knowledge, what is the rationale then for moving the house forward if the neighbor would actually prefer to have it set back?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from my perspective as a professional planner, that's not the right solution to the issue here. As you can see in the westerly elevation, you've got 2 second-floor windows. Well, I would suggest to you that it's at least 2 second-floor windows that would be introduced into the rear yard of not only this property immediately to the west, but that setback would essentially create an overlook situation for all of the rear yards along this side of the street. From my perspective, I don't believe that's a suitable planning response. I think the better solution is to push the building forward. Again, the areas of the area where the infraction is, it's this area over here that is the roof of the floor area that's above the garage. So what that does is it is sloped, and it is, as I mentioned earlier, recessed into the roof line. So in terms of overall impact of massing on that corner, which is the 85 centimeters, which doesn't comply with the front yard setback, it's that area that we're seeking relief for. In my mind as a professional planner, that's a better planning solution than pushing that building back and introducing that massing into the rear yard. The property immediately behind has been developed so that there's it's an odd angle of the placement of the dwelling, and that dwelling is actually quite close to the rear yard for this property. So given that existing situation, you'd also be introducing this new building, which is 2 stories in the rear yard and has arguably a pretty substantial rear window. You'd be pushing that window closer to the property to the north. And from my perspective, I don't believe that's the appropriate planning response.
Thank you. Committee members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Capper.
Thank you very much.
I will entertain a motion. Mr. Charlebois.
All right, Mr. Chairman. Having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, and certainly listened to the comments here from the next door neighbor as well as Mr. Capper, I find myself faced with this. It's 0.85 centimeters, give or take. You know, you could move it back 0.85 centimeters, you could move it forward 0.85 centimeters. The neighbor wants to move it back, the owner wants to move it forward. Both of them are right, you know, there's nothing really wrong about 8.5 centimeters in this particular case. And so what I have to do is I have to take a look at what the applicant's looking for, what the next door neighbor wants, and what the town again has supported here. And again, I'm going to find, I'm going to lean more towards the town's analysis as the experts in this particular area. I find that the variance here is just too small for me to make a judgment call. It would be on more favoritism than anything else. So I'm going to find that that this particular application does meet the four tests under the Planning Act. I'm going to make it recommend that it be approved with the condition in here that the proposed dwelling to be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 23rd, 2018 is submitted, and further that the condition that this approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Nobody objecting? Your application is approved, sir. I'll call application CAV A043 at 20 Highland Road.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Boardman. I'm agent on behalf of the property owners of 20 Highland Road.
Thank you.
My address is at Unit 2, 90 Prince Charles Drive, Oakville.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, sure.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience with an interest in this application? Seeing none, committee members, would you like a presentation?
There was one question about screened-in porch versus covered porch. I don't know if you can provide any clarification on that. Okay.
There was a notation on the site plan that we submitted.
You know what? Maybe I should be directing it at you.
Sorry,
I apologize.
that's okay. There was
yes.
notation, there was at one stage a discussion with the clients about maybe putting a screened-in porch, but they decided not to, that they'd just go for one variance for lot coverage. So that was an error on the drawing on my half. So I have a revised drawing that I can submit to the committee to replace, that just says a covered porch.
Well, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
You would have no objection if I mentioned that in any decision, that this specifically, that the...
No?
Okay.
No.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charlebois. So I'm not seeing a need for any further presentation. If not, I will entertain a motion, please.
Yeah, I might as well go since... Mr. Chairman, again, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, and noting that there was it was raised by the town that the drawing showed a screened-in porch, which would have required a further variance versus the covered porch, and hearing from the applicant that that was a mistake. And at this meeting, she has presented us with a revised drawing showing that this is only a proposed covered porch and not a screen porch. Also taking into account that the town is in agreement with this particular application. I do note that there's no one from the public, either in writing or here today, that have raised any objections. I'm going to find that this particular variance does meet the four tests on the Planning Act, make a recommendation that it be approved. Subject to the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans. I'm going to use the same date, February 21st, 2008, as submitted, with the notation that the porch is a covered porch and not a screen porch. And further, that the condition that approval will expire 2 years from the days of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve? Nobody opposed. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much.
I now call application CAV A044 at 1376 Outlook Terrace.
Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Doris Chung from Doris Chung Architect. My address is 20 Wortham Court, Unit 20, Richmond Hill, Ontario. I'm sorry I did not prepare a presentation today. I thought it is so simple.
You may not need one, so let me just canvass the room, see if there's anyone in the room with an interest in this application. I'm not seeing any takers. Committee, would you like a presentation? There you go. You didn't need to bring one.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardcastle, you look like you want to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted another opportunity to use this microphone. Having reviewed the materials including the staff report, undertaken a site visit, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed rear yard addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 20th, 2018 as submitted, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present to speak to the committee or any written materials submitted on behalf with respect to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Nobody opposed. Your application is approved.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now head to CAV A046 at 150 Sparling Court.
Hello, committee. I'm Trevor Henry from Cedar Springs Landscape Group, and I'm representing Troy and Faith Campbell at 150 Sparling Court.
Thank you, sir. Is anyone in the room with an interest in this application? Committee, would you like a presentation?
Who's the owner?
Okay, so I assume you're not in opposition.
No.
Well, then I don't think we'll require a presentation. Committee, can I get a motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having reviewed the materials undertaken my site visit, I would put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. The motion should be subject to two conditions, the first being that the proposed accessory building be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted. The second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there are no members of the public present, and we have received no written submissions with respect to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? Nobody opposed? Your application is approved, sir.
Thank you.
CAV A048, 1321 Avon Crescent.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joris Kieran, Kieran Design, 100 Bronte Road, Unit 10. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Anyone in the audience with an interest in this application? Looking like it's only the last applicant? Probably not.
I do have one item I'd like to bring forward.
Certainly.
My client has asked that the second part of the condition that was added by planning staff pertaining to the revised driveway design to be submitted to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning be removed from the wording of that condition. So he's okay with the first part of the condition, but not the second part of the condition. And the reason for that is he wants to retain his rights to, or option to remove the tree. His intent is to retain the tree and to make efforts to retain the tree. But he also wants to maintain a two-car wide driveway. And he doesn't want to, be forced to give that up. He also wants to note that that tree is a private tree It's not a town tree, so he feels it should be at his discretion. And he's also willing to replant the required replacement trees and go beyond that and plant some more mature trees if that helps to offset the canopy loss. If he chooses to remove the tree, but that's not a certain thing at this point.
Have you had discussion with staff about this request?
No.
That's the short and the long answer.
Well, I was in to see Kate, a short notice, who wasn't available. So I made a one-time attempt, but it would have just been a preliminary discussion. I didn't really have anything other than what I just mentioned to say.
Okay, I think in fairness to the committee, we'll ask Kate to her opinion of your request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the committee, while on the survey the tree has been identified as being on private property, is awfully close to the property line, which would potentially qualify the tree as being a boundary tree. And I think what staff are attempting to do with preserving or protecting that tree is, in the absence of having an arborist report, in the absence of having information where that tree has been inspected and its vitality been determined, the tree should be protected in accordance with our official plan policies to protect the canopy coverage that we currently experience at the town of Oakville. Therefore, it is our recommendation that the condition that's been presented to you remain. Should the applicant proceed with doing these studies and demonstrating that the tree is in poor health and should be removed, then staff would be happy to clear that condition. Until such time as that can be demonstrated, it's staff's view that it's appropriate to reduce the width of the driveway at the property line to maintain protection around that tree. The driveway can still accommodate 2 cars side by side in the driveway and still protect the tree.
Thank you. Mr. Hardcastle?
This is a question for staff. Would staff contemplate a revision to the condition, something that would lay that as an option out, something along the lines of subject to revised driveway design and or submission of acceptable arborist report? And maybe that would provide some comfort to the applicant and also protect for the possibility of resolving the matter without revising the driveway, subject to the sign-off by the Director of Planning.
Through you, Mr. Chairman of the committee, if the committee wishes to impose a condition of an arborist report as part of this variance application, it's earlier in the normal process. Typically, that's done at the site alteration process. I don't object to having it done earlier if the applicant is prepared to assess the merits of that tree in order to justify that the driveway width is appropriate.
Mr. Kieran, do you have any thoughts with respect to that?
We will be getting an arborist report done, and we're going to look at a permeable paver solution for that portion of the driveway. But because, the way that the condition is worded, that it has to be at the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, my client is just not comfortable with that, condition, and he feels it's too restrictive, because if the Director of Planning feels that the remedy that we're proposing is insufficient for whatever reason, then he or she could refuse the application. And he doesn't want to be in that situation, because having that a certain width in the driveway, he's been advised that it's kind of key to the the overall value of the home, the resale value of the home, the usability of the driveway, the practical nature of that whole space for vehicular movement. So definitely we'll get the arborist report, definitely we'll look at options. I'm even happy to discuss that further with planning, but we just don't want to be tied to a specific remedy there.
perhaps this is premature then. Maybe we should defer this and resolve this issue before it comes back before this committee. It strikes me that you're expressing some level of goodwill, want to express some level of goodwill, but don't want to be tied to things. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to kind of take this back and resolve the issue to the satisfaction and bring it back before the committee, so the committee's not in the middle of this kind of an issue.
Well, I mean, we feel that there's an appropriate process through the site plan application, the site alteration process, and then also the new tree bylaw kind of addresses all this. So I'm not sure if a deferral, yeah, actually, I don't know the answer to that because I'm not sure what my client, we didn't talk about that, so I'm not sure if I can answer the question about whether he would accept a deferral at this stage. I think he would, my understanding is that he would like to proceed with the application tonight and, with a decision on this application with the only change being that be removed. I'd be happy to reword it, but I'm not sure if there's a rewording that's possible that would satisfy their concern and not lock us into something that we're not prepared to lock into.
Karen, I think what the committee is saying is they understand your concern, but they're also not comfortable in outright striking the second part of the condition, and they're suggesting that, and the committee could vote to defer whether you're in a position to agree with that or not, but I think what I'm hearing is the committee is suggesting that maybe a more appropriate condition would be something like subject to the submission of an arborist report to the satisfaction of the director of planning and the revised driveway design if required. But I am also sensing that the committee doesn't want to amend the condition to something you're not going to say you're satisfied with. So I think what I'm hearing is if the committee chooses to approve the application, they're either inclined to approve it with the condition requested by staff, defer it and let you get the arborist report done and work out the driveway with staff, or put in a middle road condition with your concurrence. So.
The committee cannot approve it and strike the sentence from the condition?
Absolutely, the committee can. I'm just not sensing the committee is willing to do that.
Okay. Well, I guess my client is requesting tonight that be decided on tonight.
Okay, thank you. With that, if there's no other questions?
Just want to clarify so that I understand completely. You've been given the option to defer, you said no. You've been given a variation of the clause, you say no. You want the clause struck. Do you want us to vote with this clause, or do you want us to just decide whether we want to do this or not? Like just say yes to the variance subject to this condition, or if we can't do that, just to turn down the variance? I just want to be clear.
Yeah. I guess we would like you to make a decision on approving or not approving this application with that sentence removed. And I don't even know if that's possible. I guess that's my first question. Is that possible, or is it sort of do we have to accept it the way it is, or can we request that it be considered with that sentence removed and then you make a decision on that?
The committee has the ability to, amend the variances themselves, choose to impose a requested condition or not impose a requested condition, impose an additional condition, or amend a condition. So okay. The committee has the ability to do any of those things. But so I think what we're hearing is you're asking the committee to render a decision, and that decision may come back as a denial, an approval with the conditions, approval with amended conditions, or the committee may decide that, as Mr. Hardcastle said, maybe it's premature and vote to defer it, but at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the committee, and they're going to make that decision or make a motion, and we'll get a decision out of it.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I don't want to seem inflexible, but I don't think that the deferral will get us any further to a solution, because it's going to bring us back to the same condition of, satisfying the director of planning, which is what we're trying to get out of. So we want to see if that's something that will be possible.
Thank you, Mr. Kieran. With that, I'll turn it over to the committee and ask for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was asking about the condition because on my site visit and my review of the materials, I think that the trees along the frontage of this site are a defining element of the character to a large degree. I think that efforts to preserve and protect that mature tree should be undertaken to those means possible given the condition of that tree. So while I've heard what you've said, at this stage I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to the condition as it stands. That's going to be my motion. I do find that the requested variance, subject to the conditions that are proposed by staff as well as our standard condition, do conform to the four tests of the would conform to the four tests of the Act. So this motion will be subject to that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 26, 2018 as submitted, subject to a revised driveway design to ensure the abutting tree is not negatively impacted to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. In addition, there would be a second condition being our standard condition with respect to the 2-year sunset on the approval. And I would note that there are no members of the public present who have made a deputation with respect to this matter or any written submission received with respect to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Discussion on the motion? Mr. Charlebois.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to chime in. I mean, just for the edification of people here is, lots of times when we get these applications, they seem to make sense, but there's always something a little bit off, and the municipality always has the ability to push back on it or to suggest, make this sort of suggestion. It's been my experience that both parties go into this thing with good intent to solve it. The trouble is, of course, you don't know what the tree is. You could have. You could have gone and got an arborist report. You could have done the whole thing. You could have come forward to this committee and said, hey, I've got all the facts here that supports this driveway doesn't have to be there. But for whatever reason, you and your client chose not to do it. So I actually think the request is quite fair. In the lack of any evidence, let's assume that we can work out something. And if it doesn't work out and your clients don't like it, they can always come back again. I know that's a big hassle and whatever, but they can. They're still within their rights. They don't have to live with this. It's not a final decision. So on that basis, I too am going to support the motion by my colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. I'll call a vote on the motion. All those in favor, the motion on the table? Seeing nobody opposed, your application is approved, subject to the conditions as requested by staff.
Thank you.
CAV A049, 1388 Dundas Street West. Name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Catherine McEwen from Corsiac Urban Planning, 277 Lakeshore Road, Oakville.
Thank you. I'm seeing that the only person left in the room is your client. I'm going to assume no one is here to object. Committee, are you looking for a presentation? Mr. Charlebois.
Mr. Chairman, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the application, as well as the town's written staff report, and I do want to note that there were at least 2 letters of objections that, if I can make a point, I think it's something that you and your client should pay attention to, although it has little impact necessarily on the variance here at hand. I do want to state, just because we are being filmed live and any of these particular people who raised the objections aren't here, that behind the scenes there was correspondence going back between myself and the town looking for clarification on whether a temporary tent such as this really fell under the provisions of section 45.2 and of the variance. And I just want to state that after posing the question and getting the answers and speaking with town staff again, that I am satisfied that it does. So I'm going to put forward a recommendation that this variance be approved, finding it meets at least one of the conditions under section 45.2. And bear with me, I can't remember if the town imposed a condition, so I don't think so. Yes, they did. Sorry. That the condition from the town is that the applicant submit a site plan that ensures the tent location does not impact access to barrier-free parking spaces to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. There's no reason for a time limit on this because there's no building permit or anything required, so that's the only condition as far as I would know.
Thank you, Mr. Charlevoix. Discussion on the motion? None. All those in favor of the motion to, oh, sorry. Kate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, the tent is subject to a building permit, so it would be appropriate to apply the building permit condition, because I believe the footings that need to go in, is it not? If I'm correct?
Once a tent is over 20 feet by 30 feet, it is required to get a permit through the building department. Even though they're temporary, every time they go in, they have to get this permit. Yes, so doing the 2-year wouldn't really work.
Sure.
So in this situation, for example, the tent would go up for a period of time for a special event and then would come back down.
That's correct.
And there'd be a period of time that would go on and they'd have to apply for a building permit again. So it would.
And it's a tent permit, not through the building.
As a friendly suggestion to my colleague, given the cyclical nature of that, it may not be appropriate to put that condition in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the committee. I just wanted to clarify for the record. Secondly, the applicant has actually presented you with a revised plan that has also been provided to me earlier, which does denote new accessible parking spaces, barrier-free parking spaces on the northern portion noted in red here. And to a suggestion to the applicant, if she does have copies here this evening that she can provide to you, then perhaps the revised plans could be accepted by the committee and then the condition is not required.
I can give the plan, and I think, no. So what we were proposed.
Jasmina will remind me, you've now given us that plan, so.
Yes, yep. So on the plan, we had proposed, while the tent and temporary washrooms are in place, restricting access to the 2 existing accessible spaces. So for an opening weekend, when the tents are there, we could do 2 temporary accessible spaces to the required sizes with like a temporary sign, if that's to the satisfaction of staff.
But would that be different than this drawing?
This is the drawing that shows that those 2 red temporary accessible spaces while the tent and washrooms are erected.
So every time the tent's erected, this would be the situation?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if approval be tied to the drawing provided to the committee at tonight's meeting, not sure it's dated,
Yeah,
and
Mr.
that
Chairman.
should satisfy the condition.
Yeah. I'm prepared to agree to that suggestion. So where I had initially said that the applicant submit a site plan that ensures the tent location does not impact access to barrier-free parking spaces to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, I can take forward that this be revised, that it's conditional subject to the site plan submitted to the committee tonight, dated March 26, 2018. Are you happy with that?
Yep, that's great.
Seeing nods all around. So with that, I will ask for a vote on that motion to approve. All those in favor? Seeing nobody opposed, your application is approved with the amended condition.
Thank you.
Do we have minutes? Okay, members, there's no minutes. Motion to adjourn with the dropping of the mic. Moved by Mr. Hardcastle.
Mark, what date?
The
drawings?
March 26.